Welcome back to the Beginner Backend for Plebs series. So you may have seen lesson 0 where we were just getting started and setting up your development environment, the things you need, Node.js and VS Code to actually start writing some code. And today we're going to be starting a new TypeScript project. So I may have mentioned last time in the video a little bit that I'm designing this series kind of like how I wish I would have learned how to code. I started learning how to code about 2 years ago with the goal of getting into Bitcoin development, and I didn't know what it meant to write code. I didn't know what it meant to be a Bitcoin developer. I was still just learning a bunch about Bitcoin. I mean, still am. I'm still always learning, but it was kind of a lot. All of these things all at once. And looking back on it, there's a few things I wish I would have done differently. So I'm trying to take all that and put it into this course. And one of those things is I wish I would have just learned TypeScript right off the bat. I learned JavaScript to start and then spent about 8 months or so before I started to learn TypeScript. And for me, TypeScript is a huge game changer. It ends up making my larger projects much more organized and scalable, meaning in the future, I'm able to change things without breaking other things more easily. And just in general, I think having an understanding of the types of your variables is really helpful in like explicitly saying this function is going to look like this, and if I want it to look like something else, then I have to go into my types and change it. So none of what I said might make sense right now, but just know that TypeScript is a little bit more challenging than JavaScript, but from my perspective, it's something that's worth learning right off the bat. So if you want to get into it, follow along. I got the link to the slides here at tinyurl.com/plebdevs-backend-1. You see it there? Cool. So just a little word of advice here. Learn by doing. The series is going to go fast. I'm just going to kind of like show you everything, and then you're going to be expected to actually pick it up and run with it and figure out what's going on. So one major tip is to type everything out. This is the doing part. You're not going to learn anything by just copy and pasting. You actually have to go through and type the words, even if it's word for word. When in this world of open source coding, plagiarism is something that's totally acceptable. It helps you build much better code much faster because you're building on top of what's already been done. But I just recommend from the beginning, start by typing it out rather than copy pasting. And finally, ask for help. Feel free to reach out to the Plebs community. There's a bunch of people like me and like you just learning how to code and all willing to help. So I recommend you go check that out and check out plebdevs.com. We also have a link to our Discord here and some more in-depth front-end and back-end courses. And finally, our workshops. So I'm kind of building this series ideally so that you can get the most out of these workshops, which are a little bit more advanced, but go into more interesting Bitcoin and Nostr topics. So hopefully after this series, you will be experienced enough that you can start building your own applications on Bitcoin, Nostr, and Lightning, and any other freedom tech. And finally, also ask an LLM for help, like something like ChatGPT. They don't always get it right, but it's a huge advantage that no one before this had. So use it, and I think that it'll help you accelerate your learning journey a lot faster. So to get the most out of this lesson, you should have taken lesson 0, where we installed a few things. We installed Node.js and VS Code. If you already have those, then you're good to go. And I talked a little bit about the JavaScript event loop. So I highly recommend, if you don't have a lot of experience with JavaScript, check out this video. This guy here. He talks like how the JavaScript V8 engine works, and I've just found this video really eye-opening in helping me kind of understand what was going on under the hood with JavaScript. So it's called "What the Heck is the Event Loop Anyway?" With Philip Roberts. So yeah, with that, we should be ready to get into kind of starting our first TypeScript project, building on what we had from lesson 0. So this was a challenge that I gave you. Basically, take this code and make it run. So we're going to make it run as TypeScript, but the solution would have just been open up a new JavaScript file, paste this in, and if you called it index.js, then you would use node index.js to execute that, or whatever you name the file, you would specify that. So we're going to take that in a second, but first let's start a new TypeScript project while we're here. So I'm just going to open up, well, let's see, I think I already have one here. I already have a terminal open. So I'm just going to follow the commands that I have on the screen here. First, we are going to start a new project and then enter it. So we're using change directory to go in there. Now you can see in my terminal path, I'm in this new project. And I have VS Code installed, so I'll just do code dot. And you can see I actually already pasted this in there, but so it's a little weird because my VS Code remembered that. But that's okay. Now we can see we're in here and we have nothing. So next what we need to do is use this npm init call. So if you have Node.js installed, you'll have npm, and by calling npm init with this -y flag, we are basically initializing a new JavaScript project. And all that does for us is creates this package.json, which right now is really simple. We don't have anything installed. I basically just took the name of this directory and then used some boilerplate here. Now that we have that, we can install what we need to write TypeScript. Right now we can only write JavaScript, but once we install this stuff, we will be able to write TypeScript. So we're using npm install to install packages, and then I added this save dev flag, which you'll see what that does, and then there's the names of everything we want to install. So that should be installed. Now we got a package lock and node modules. So node modules, you notice, if we go to our package.json, that save dev flag puts everything under dev dependencies. So once this gets deployed into production, we won't need to install all the dev dependencies, which is just kind of nice. But so you'll notice this is all the stuff we have installed, and it gets put in this node modules. So like we installed TS node, and now we have TS node here. And if you're really curious, this is where like sometimes this is the compiled code, so it can be like, especially if you look at the dist here, like this is all minified, and if we can look at it, sometimes it might be a little hard to read. But yeah, this is where all of our like libraries end up, is within node modules here. So now that we have that, we need to initialize TypeScript. And so this is gonna, just like npm init created a new package.json, we're gonna use npx tsc -- init, and something happened. I'm not sure what this is all about, but oh, looks like something. This is like this is dear envis. Whoa, that's weird. That's from like Nick's stuff. Let's see. I'm just gonna close this. Open. Let's see what happens if I do npx tsc init in here. All right, that worked. I don't know. There was something weird going on with my VS Code there, but now what that's done is it's given us a tsconfig. So in here, you actually could have just created this tsconfig yourself, because we don't want any of this stuff. So we are just going to swap it for this that I have here. And you don't really need to know what any of this means. You can find all this stuff in the TypeScript docs. Like you'll see if I hover over this, you can see www.typescriptlang.org/tsconfig, and it will explain what module is doing here. Just notice that this include here is including all TypeScript files and excluding anything within node modules. So this configuration will apply to everything that ends in .ts or .tsx, but will not apply to anything within node modules. All right. So now we're going to go back to that JavaScript code, and we're going to make it run using TypeScript. So what we're going to do is create a new file in source lesson 0 challenge, and then we're going to paste in that code and run it using tsnode. So I always like to just use the terminal here. So I'm going to say mkdir or source to make a new directory, and touch source slash lesson 0 challenge.ts. This creates a new file, as we can see in here. And now I'm just going to go and grab this challenge code here. And this is something that I couldn't quite figure out, but length here, saying cannot redeclare block scoped variable length. So you'll notice we don't have another variable in here named length, but it's coming from this lib.dom, which is something else that exists like within TypeScript and Node. So it's like that code is still there, even though it's not in our file, but it's within the environment that we're using. So it's saying that like this name is taken. You can't reuse this name. So what we're gonna do is change length to my length. I just held down Control there, and it let me have multiple cursors. So this looks exactly the same. This is still JavaScript code, and all JavaScript is considered TypeScript. TypeScript is like a superset of JavaScript. So we didn't change anything here. We just added this TS extension rather than .js. But what we can do now is use tsnode, as long as I spelled everything right, to execute it. So instead of running node and then the name of our project, we're going to use tsnode. And see, it runs just like that. So this is TypeScript, even though it doesn't look like it. We're going to get more into actually writing some TypeScript and making it like have types, in the next lesson, but not today. So finally, for today's lesson, for getting your TypeScript environment set up, what we want is to install NodeMon. So we'll just use npm install. It doesn't like capital. So I'm installing NodeMon, and then we're just going to add this script here to our package.json. So you can see in this screenshot here, this is what we want our package.json to look like. So I'm just going to add this here. I don't know why. Maybe it doesn't like it's weird quotes that I copied in. But now we have this script under the scripts area here. So what we can do is say npm run, and then we can execute any of these scripts. So this is pointing to index.ts. That's typically like your entry point. So I'm going to move source. Here, I'll bring this up for you so you can see better. I'm going to move source slash lesson 0 challenge to source slash index.ts. And that basically just renames this lesson 0 challenge to index, because index is like usually where our whole project launches from. This is the seed of the project. So this is where we want to be watching. So what this is doing is it's using this NodeMon package to execute tsnode, and it's targeting this index.ts file. So now what we can do is say npm run dev. This is our development environment. And you'll see here we get some output, and then it says that it's waiting for changes before restart. So now what I can do is change this to see the results. So once I save, NodeMon will automatically re-execute everything. And just as quick thing right here, we can show this is how you add types. So I can say this is going to be of type number, and now it won't let me do this. I'll say it doesn't like that. So yeah, we'll get more into types later, but just so you know, this is like this is the TypeScript piece of TypeScript. It's applying these types to your variables. All right, so that's it. Here's just kind of show you some more types. We have number, string, Boolean. This is saying like we have an array of numbers. So all you do is you add a colon after the variable and then say what type it is. So I'm just showing you this as a hint for this challenge, which I kind of already gave away, but see if you can figure this out. The goal is to get a TypeScript compilation error. So if you can figure out why errors happen, then you can figure out how to not make errors happen. So try and get an error that looks something like this. And a hint, assign a value of a wrong type to a variable. So declare a variable as a certain type, but don't assign it that same type, and you'll get this error. All right. So next up, we're going to go over the basics of TypeScript and JavaScript, just like the basic syntax of actually how to write the code, functions, objects, conditionals. So that's like, if this is true, do this code. If that's true, execute some other code. And we're going to talk about loops. So loops is just like you want to repeatedly execute something, maybe over the length of some object, or you just want to do it specifically 5 times or whatever. And if we have time, we'll get into defining new types. So there's the basic types like number and string, but then we're going to get into defining more complex types as well. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and start coding.